The corruption minister resigned embroiled in a corruption scandal. The homelessness minister resigned embroiled in a scandal about evicting her own tenants. And now the housing secretary is embroiled in a scandal around her own housing and the amount of tax that she may have to pay back. Yes, is Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, next for the chop in the long line of ministerial resignations in this short-lived government? Well, my name's Tom Harwood and this is GB News Originals. Remember to click that subscribe button to stay completely up to date on this fast-moving situation. Well, for some time there had been questions about the tax paid by Angela Rayner on her homes. Indeed, what she alleges is her primary residence, but what many people now suspect is indeed not her primary residence. Why does this matter? Well, the amount of stamp duty that is due to be paid on a primary residence is lower than that of a second residence. Now, as the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, as the Deputy Prime Minister too, you might expect that Angela Rayner should know the rules about the higher level of tax one must pay on second homes. And yet, Angela Rayner, who now has 3 properties, including her taxpayer-funded London pad, of course, as a Prime Minister, as a Member of Parliament, you do get that sort of accommodation put up for you. But on top of that, what we have seen is a big question mark raised over the propriety of the tax affairs of the Deputy Prime Minister. Now, it's a complicated story. It's one that involves a compensation claim for a disabled child, a trust that was set up in that child's name, the fact that that trust bought out some of Angela Rayner's own share in a house that used to be the home in which she lived, and indeed was the family home from her husband, whom she is now divorced from. Are you keeping up? It's an incredibly difficult situation to find the weeds through, and yet this is perhaps where the Deputy Prime Minister has become unstuck. She says that she took out expert advice, and yet now it seems that advice was wrong. There are a couple of things that could have happened here. Did the lawyers that were giving her the advice, the accountants that were providing that advice, did they get it wrong? Or did the Deputy Prime Minister withhold information from them, which meant that they couldn't get it right? Well, either way, it looks like Angela Rayner will now have to pay back a considerable amount of money in tax owed. Perhaps £40,000, perhaps more. There's up to a 100% penalty that can be added to that if it is seen to be against the rules in the most egregious form. If this is, whether it's tax avoidance, whether it's tax evasion, there are all these different rules that must be worked out. One of the things this raises is simply how complicated the tax code is in this country, how difficult it is for people to navigate with or without accountants and lawyers. But one thing's for sure, given that this was the Housing Secretary, the Deputy Prime Minister, surely she of all people should have known how to follow the rules, or at least had the people to tell her how to follow the rules. After all, everyone else in the country has to follow the rules. Anyone else lucky enough to have more than one property has to pay higher tax on that second property. Anyone else in this country has to pay through the nose for stamp duty, one of the most pernicious taxes that gums up the housing market, that means that only the very wealthiest people with cash to spare can afford to move around. Of course, one of the things about stamp duty is it makes it more expensive to move property. To even a property of the same value, you will lose value because you have to pay that tax. That makes it harder for people to move. That gums up the property market. That means people are stuck in places where they might be less economically productive. I digress. This tax is a terrible tax, and yet the Deputy Prime Minister has found a way to avoid paying it. Well, she says that she's sorry. She says that she didn't know what she was doing was wrong, and she says that she will now comply with the law. She indeed has referred herself to the ethics watchdog, to that advisor within Parliament and indeed at the government level. That is going to be an investigation that must take place quickly. The public has a huge interest in this case. This is a big scandal for the Deputy Prime Minister, especially given how the Deputy Prime Minister has spoken of Conservative politicians who have got their taxes wrong. For instance, the former Chancellor Nadeem Zahawi, well, he was in the sights of Angela Rayner when a similar tax mishap was made when he was, just before he was Chancellor. It, of course, all came out during that period in 2022. Now, given that Angela Rayner was quite so vicious in her attacks towards Conservatives who made similar errors, it does seem to be the fact that there is a certain amount of vitriol directed in her direction from the general public, and perhaps that is equal and opposite to that she gave out. If you can't give it out, some may say, perhaps you shouldn't take it, or indeed vice versa. But this is a big issue for this government. They have lost minister after minister. They've lost the Transport Secretary after a particular difficulty with regard to a mobile phone and not reporting that it was, or reporting that that phone was stolen, but then actually it not being stolen and hiding that all up. We've seen cabinet resignations at a rate that perhaps surprised some people for a government that intended to come in being cleaner than clean and whiter than white. We'll all remember that Sue Gray was coming in as the initial chief of staff to this government. She was meant to be running a tight ship. She was meant to be presiding over a very clean incoming administration, and yet within months she herself was forced to resign after presiding over scandals and mishaps, not least the freebies scandal, which saw glasses for passes, a scandal that alleged a senior donor to the Labour Party, Lord Ali, got a Downing Street pass after he provided free glasses, free suits to the Prime Minister. Also free concert tickets, free dresses given out to people like Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves too. Freebies after freebies, not a good look for this government when it came into office about 365 days ago, if we remember those scandals at the time of the Labour Party conference in September 2024. Well, now it's September 2025. It's been 1 year that this government has been in office, and yet they're preparing for their annual conference with just as much scandal and even less public support. It's remarkable seeing the decline that the Labour Party has seen in the polls. The polls have taken them down the fastest of any newly elected government in living memory. This government has lower approval ratings than Boris Johnson enjoyed at the end of his time as Prime Minister. Now, given that context, it is very difficult to see how the Deputy Prime Minister navigates the coming days and the coming weeks. She will be hoping that this investigation, this ethics investigation, is swift. She will be hoping that she is only seen to have made an innocent and accidental error. And yet, looking at all the evidence, looking at everything that she had at her fingertips, many people are asking how indeed could she have been quite so careless, given such weighty responsibility she has as the Deputy Prime Minister of this country. If indeed it is just a case of her being careless, of her not knowing the rules, of not being on top of her brief, of not understanding the tax structure of this country, or not fully briefing her lawyers and accountants so that they can properly institute the rules of this land as they are written, well, if it was incompetence, is that not too a resigning matter? It's not just malice that should be in the crosshairs here, but also incompetence. That indeed seems to be the general mood of the British public. And clearly there has been an outpouring of dismay. Graffiti now sprayed on the beachfront home of the Deputy Prime Minister, the home that was underpaid in tax, we now learn. Well, much more to come on this story, of course. We'll be keeping a close eye on it here at GB News. Remember to click that subscribe button to stay up to date as this story does develop. There will be more in the coming days, I am sure. But in the meantime, do remember to subscribe, download the GB News app wherever you get your iPhone or Android applications, and always keep watching us on live TV as well. See you next time.